One thing that I wanted to us be more careful with regards to how we talk about is the different countries around the Persian Gulf, the Arab countries around the Persian Gulf. People refer to them as the Gulf countries, which is I don't say that because I want to make sure that every time we mention the Persian Gulf. But a lot of people, when they talk about the way that they're responding to the Islamic Republic, they're treating them like a monolith, as if they all have the same agenda, the same response, and the same strategy. And even when people who want to get more nuanced about it, they put the UAE and Saudi Arabia in one camp, and they put Qatar and Oman in another camp, and they also forget about Bahrain, I don't know, Kuwait and Iraq. And I just wanted us to come up with a better way of categorizing this and talking about it, right? So, so the way that people just put it in two categories, they see UAE and Saudi Arabia as more aggressive against the Islamic Republic, and they look at Qatar and Oman as a little bit more conservative and held back and trying to be more diplomatic. But actually, I think it would be more accurate if we look at it in three different categories, right? So the Saudi category, the UAE category, and the Qatar category. So in the Qatar category, we still have Qatar and Oman, and these country strategies, even after they were attacked by the Islamic Republic, is try to do de-escalation. Both Oman and Qatar are now on a de-escalation strategy. They are not just responding, condemning the Islamic Republic attack on them. They are, especially Qatar, is pointing fingers at Israel, and they are saying that it's Israel that is the reason why this has started, even though they were just bombed by the Islamic Republic. They are pointing the finger at Israel. They're saying the continuation of this de escalation is a strategy by Israel to weaken all sides so that they could become the major power in the Middle East by just getting everybody to fight against each other. So this is a trap by the Israelis. So we're not going to fall into that trap. And even though they were attacked, they're trying to. There's still many people within Qatar that are continuing to have very friendly relationship with the IRGC. And there's new reports that suggest that the Qataris are working with the Pakistanis to try to figure out a way to completely end these military operations and come up with a deal, right? So that's the Qatar Oman perspective of this. They're trying to not respond aggressively to the Islamic Republic and try to find a way to de-escalate. Okay, so you would think that Saudi Arabia would be on the escalation category, a maximum escalation category, because of the years of hostilities and they had against the Islamic Republic. But the Saudis are right now, the Saudis, the Iraqis, the Kuwaitis are kind of have a middle approach here. And the most aggressive bloc right now against the Islamic Republic among the Arab countries in the Persian Gulf is the UAE and Bahrain. So the UAE and Bahrain are the most aggressively against the Islamic Republic. They see this as an existential crisis. They don't have the east-west pipeline that Saudi Arabia has. So right now, the UAE has a pipeline that bypasses the Strait of Hormuz that at maximum capacity could move 1.8 million barrels per day without bypassing the Strait of Hormuz, and it's much more vulnerable to Islamic Republic attacks. The Saudis, as much as they hate the current tension in the Middle East as a threat to their business model when it comes to diversification, tourism, becoming a local business hub, the fact that they have the East West pipeline means that they could actually move 7 million barrels per day to the Red Sea at really higher prices for of oil. They could take advantage of this time, even though they don't like the current situation. They're not as desperate as the UAE and the Saudis. The silver linings right now to the Saudis is that it's damaging UAE as a major competitor to Saudi Arabia as a central business tourism hub, right? So the Saudis and the UAE have been in a major competition against each other to for them to diversify away from fossil fuels, and the Saudis have been late to the game, and the UAE has is a lot ahead of the Saudis when it comes to this. Like when you think about tourism in the Middle East, you obviously think of Dubai, way before you think of anywhere place in Saudi Arabia. When you think about like a center of commerce, business, trade, travel, and the major airport, AI, technology, crypto, whatever, you think Dubai. Okay, you don't think of Saudi Arabia. You do think of Saudi Arabia, but only after you thought about Dubai. So because Vision 2030 requires a lot of competition against the UAE, the fact that the UAE's business model is collapsing because of the instability, because the Islamic Republic is targeting UAE more than any other country, more than even Israel, the Saudis were like, okay, maybe we should be not so hostile to the Islamic Republic so that they just focus on the UAE. And this is actually not, it's not that bad for us. This is also one of the reasons why the UAE left OPEC. Okay, other than the fact that you need $100 per barrel oil price for the Saudis to be able to break even. But for the UAE, that number is 50. That's another reason why the UAE left OPEC. But this is another reason because the UAE's agenda when it comes to oil, diversification, renewable energy is very much different and at odds with the Saudi Arabia. So you can see like a divorce happening here, right? But this whole Arab Islamic unity between these Arab countries is completely breaking apart. Everybody is moving in a different direction. And the Saudis are not as against this escalation as the UAE, not as against this current situation. So sorry, UAE is once escalation. The Saudis are in the middle position. They have a position between the Qataris and the UAEs because they have that silver lining, because they have that east-west pipeline that makes them be able to at least sell up to 7 million barrels per day at these high prices, something that the UAE cannot do right now. And because it's reducing the strength of the relative strength of the UAE's business model as a competitor against them, they are not as much for aggression against the Islamic Republic as the UAE is. This is why the UAE needs to completely reevaluate its allies. And this is why the UAE is becoming a major ally of Israel, something that is very difficult for the Saudis to do, right? So when it comes to Saudis, they're rethinking. Everybody is trying to diversify their allies and supporters as not just relying on the United States. So Saudi is looking at other countries like Turkey and Egypt, and the UAE is looking at Israel and getting closer and closer to Israel. So this is now, you could see all of these countries, they used to have a more ideological and more ethnic excuse for bonding together as Arabs or Muslims. But as economies grows, ethnicity becomes less relevant, religion becomes less relevant, and all that matters is economic growth and stability. And that way, the previous ideological or ethnic reasons for bonding become less of a big deal. And what matters is who's richer and who has a stronger army. And this is why UAE doesn't see it as a problem at all anymore to consider Israel a major ally. And this is why also Saudi Arabia is looking at Pakistan for security, for a security agreement, and also Turkey and Egypt. They're trying to figure out other ways to cooperate with other countries when it comes to their creating a military alliance bloc. So I think that categorization will help us going forward, and I just wanted to introduce that here in our group. So that's a more nuanced way of looking at all of this. All right.
Samantha wanted to ask, what about Kuwait?
So Kuwait, based on what we just saw recently, Kuwait seems to be more in the Saudi camp because it was both Saudi. Oh, actually, that's a very good question. One other than the UAE leaving OPEC, that suggests that this analysis is correct. We also saw the Saudis getting frustrated with the Americans, and we saw public signs of that when Saudi Arabia refused to allow President Trump use its air bases and its airspaces for Project Freedom. And that's why Project Freedom was put on a pause, and then it's back on again because I don't know what they talked to them behind the scenes, but that was something that happened. And along with Saudi Arabia, it was also Kuwait also had the same response, telling the Americans that you cannot use our air bases or airspace. So it seems like Kuwait is completely in the same line, in the same camp of Saudi Arabia. Also, we should also consider Iraq as in it's more similar to Qatar and Oman for obvious reasons. Iraq also doesn't want to get into a lot of hostilities with the Islamic Republic because the Islamic Republic has too much influence in Iraq. But they're trying to slowly reduce their influence right now. I actually have another report that shows that Iraq is trying to slowly reduce that influence. I don't know if we're going to get time. I don't think we have time today to get to that.
Okay, I have responses from Jose and Sketch, and please 3 sentences each.
Before Saudi, keep it short, said no fly zone to the United States, Keir Starmer went to Saudi Arabia and made the mistake of thinking the British were still in running that area. And the Crown Prince of Saudi Arabia told him to get the fuck out of his country. So it's not just the US that's getting a little backlash from the Saudis.
Sketch?
I would like to know how much of this is this genuinely political backlash and how much is this you can't just come here and tell me over the news that you're going to use my base. You got to call first. Because honestly, if you try to use my base and you don't call first, I am going to get mad. I'm going to say, no, you're supposed to call first. And I'm wondering if this whole Iran situation, if it could be that, because as I understand it, these people are very big on respect, especially about territory. And if you just announce on the news that you're going to use their base and you don't talk to them first, they might get mad and they might say, hey, you publicly, you can't just do that. Now have a talk with us, then I'll let you use it. Because they might not be, what I'm saying is might not be so far apart.
So it's something similar to what you're saying. The disrespect that they felt seems to be that Project Freedom was announced without them being in the know about it, right? Obviously, any form of use of military base needs to be with coordination of, they always communicate that, right? So that will, it needs to be like, you can't use a military base for that. They're already, you have a lot of Saudi people working there, right? So there is a lot of cooperation that needs to happen for that, for those bases to be used and stuff like that. I don't know, maybe Jeffrey will educate us. That's not the case, and the Americans do everything without any Saudis being involved in there. I don't know how independent those bases are, but what I've heard is that it's two things that offended the Saudis. One, this whole Project Freedom being announced, because it seemed to the Saudis that, okay, apparently the Strait of Hormuz is we're going to be in this situation for a very long time, and the Americans are not very serious regarding protecting us against the Islamic Republic. So the whole petrodollar agreement that we had for so many years is now being challenged again. And that, and also the fact that the attack on, so even though the Saudis see themselves as competitors to the UAE, they were still pissed off that the Americans considered that attack on the UAE to not be a violation of the ceasefire, right? Because even though UAE is a competitor to the Saudis, this suggests that, what the hell? It suggests that the Americans are not as committed to supporting the Arab countries in this region. So it's a spectrum. It's not binary. Even the UAE is an ally and an enemy to the Saudis. It's like, it's not just one or another. They sometimes consider them an ally as well in different scenarios. So the whole agreement, the whole unwritten agreement that it has been here around the Persian Gulf for so many years now, for so many decades now, is that the Americans will come and aggressively respond to whoever attacks any of the Arab countries in this region. So the Saudis were shocked that not only the Americans didn't aggressively respond to the Islamic Republic after UAE was attacked, they came out and said that was not even a violation of ceasefire. That's how little they saw of it. By the way, all of this has started for many years now in Trump's first term, when the Islamic Republic used drones to attack Aramco, and President Trump didn't respond to that against the Islamic Republic. The Saudis have ever since been seeing this movement away by the Americans, like this reduction in the commitment of the Americans to protect the Arab countries in around the Persian Gulf. This is why also we have the Abraham Accords, because the Abraham Accords means that Israel will become your protector. So as we're moving away from here, you guys better make peace with Israel, because that's the strongest militarily. You're going to need them. So the Abraham Accord is basically a goodbye message to the Arab countries. It's very slow divorce between United States and these Arab countries, and basically say, "Hey, it was nice dating you. I'm leaving. By the way, have you met my friend Israel? Maybe you, maybe it could be the rebound guy here for you guys. Consider him instead." So that's what the Abraham Accords are. And UAE was like jump right into it. Sure, she's more attractive than you anyways, or he, whatever. And the Saudis were like, what? No. Okay, so the UAEs are more eager to jump into the arms of Israel than Saudi Arabia.